And from TalkCast PDX, I'm Clyde Lewis, and welcome to Channel Weird. We are here again. We've been on hiatus for a couple weeks. A number of things going on, doing the radio show, Ground Zero, and, we dealing with some COVID things going on. And so, we're back, and we're very happy. And gosh, coming back, we come back to one of the most excellent storytellers of our time. One of the most prolific storytellers. He's an experiencer. He's an author. He is the author of My Strange World, and the other is Strange Things in the Woods. And we're going to get to this book because this is an important, very compelling book about things that happen in the woods, things that go bump in the woods, I guess, rather than bump in the night. Steve Stockton, welcome to Channel Weird.
Thanks, Clyde. Glad to be here.
You and I, the whole time we've been waiting to get set up to do this. We've been having a chat, just talking about all kinds of things. I don't even know where to begin with you.
Yeah, we've been all over the place, and that's where I'm most comfortable, is all over the road.
That's great. Okay, first of all, give us a background about yourself, because I don't know a lot of people are familiar with you, but I want to introduce you, actually, because I think that people really need to know you and know what you do.
Yeah, I'm an author, investigator to a degree, more of a researcher, and an experiencer. I'm more of a legend tripper. I did some investigations and stuff years and years ago, but I prefer just to visit locations. I like to go where maybe one event has occurred instead of going expecting to see something to happen, just to bask in that. I've been doing this for well over 35 years. Had my first paranormal experience when I was between 5 and 6 years old, saw a full-body apparition, and just kind of went from there. And then I was talking to you earlier about my grandmother, self-styled gypsy witch, who's actually a granny witch or hillbilly witch, and that side of the family, how they were into seances and table tappings, and she told fortunes, read tea leaves, coffee grounds, animal entrails, made potions and spells and things for people, knew every superstition imaginable for good luck, but especially for bad luck.
Now, this is back in the Appalachians, correct?
Yeah, she's from the Great Smoky Mountains National Park area, grew up around the Cades Cove area before it was a national park. She did.
That whole area is mystical because the only experience I've had from there, I've never been there, but there was an associate that I interviewed many years ago who was digging around a graveyard, and it's an old graveyard. It was, for some reason, they have these graveyards buried in the Smoky Mountains, and they're private graveyards. Mm-hmm. And who knows why he was digging through there? I don't know if he was a grave robber, but he certainly was someone who would dig around these graveyards. And he found a gin jar, actually 2 gin jars, and they were marked. And it was interesting because they were painted red and black. They had weird writing on them, and I had to decipher the writing. I mean, the writing was, a lot of occult symbols, including the Leviathan symbol and a few other symbols that were really, really dark and witchy. And that's when I had my first experience knowing something about kitchen witches and hillbilly witches, that they do exist, and they practice some of the deepest, weirdest folk magic, including creating gin jars where they actually take a candle and they put it in the jar, and then they close it up, and then the smoke remains in there, and then they say some sort of incantation over it, and beware if you open one, right?
I hope he didn't open that. A lot of those witch
jars,
of them
did.
Yep. They're basically biohazards. A lot of times a witch will have her urine and her blood in there, among other things. So, yeah, if you find one, you don't want to open it.
Yeah, I heard, you're right on the money, because that's what I heard. I remember I was so terrified. I didn't see it. I mean, the guy had it, and he took pictures of it, and he sent it to me, and he was on the air talking about it. But one of them did break open, and he was haunted by this dark gin, literally, that was bothering him, and eventually he committed suicide. He drank himself to death because he was so caught up in this. And that's one of those sad stories about the paranormal and the occult, is that when you're messing with things that you don't understand, they become lethal.
Absolutely. It can come back and bite you, anything like that, really. I watched a YouTube video a while back of a metal detector that had found one out in the woods. He didn't know what it was. Like, I found this jar, and it's got liquids and nails and stuff in it. And I'm like, don't open it. Sure enough, he opens it, pours it out, goes through everything. Like, I feel for you.
When we're dealing with, this kitchen witch stuff, or, the Conjuring, the Grove, I remember reading Joseph Campbell, and he said that the Grove itself is a place of paranormal activity always, and that's why if someone wants to go and find themselves, they find themselves in the forest. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. It's just, especially the solitude, I think, and that if you've never really been deep in the wilderness, you don't realize just how small and infinitesimal man is until you get out into nature like that. And you're nothing when you're out there, but that's when you become nothing. That's when you absorb everything. You have to kind of just empty everything out and then take all that in.
The paranormality of the forest. That's why they call it the forest primeval. It's the idea that in there are beings and entities and spirits, animal spirits, perhaps predator spirits that are there. There are the Fae people that are there. You were telling me about the Fae people, and I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about what Fae people are. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. On my YouTube channel, Missing Persons and Mysteries, we delve into all these different theories behind, and again, it's just a theory, about the missing persons in the national parks in particular, but they go missing other places as well. And one of the things my researcher, Gemma Jade, and I have found out, she's the head writer for the show, is there is a connection between a lot of these Fae legends and how and when people go missing. And most people will brush that off and poo-poo that idea right off the bat. You're talking fairies, Fae folk. But if you look back, it's some of the fairy tales and things from the Middle Ages. Those are based in beliefs. There's almost a religion toward the Fae folk, particularly in the UK, Wales, Ireland, Scotland, that part of the world.
Yeah, Denmark, Reykjavik. I know that when they did the Olympics there in Reykjavik, they had a whole ceremony about the little people.
And in some of those Nordic countries, they will build a road around an outcrop of boulders because they don't want to disturb what might be living inside those boulders, a troll or a gnome or
right. And they believe it. They've seen them. They believe it. It is amazing. And that's the problem. Is I think that when you say the Fae folk or the fairies, I think people immediately go to their Disney mindset where they're thinking, oh, Tinkerbell, and they're thinking, I don't know, the Smurfs or some other happy little elf or Keebler elf or whatever. But reality, I mean, I did a show back in 2 or 3 Decembers ago, and I was talking about Krampus and how Krampus is a wood legend as well from Germany and Austria and other places in the Eastern European legends of Krampus. And one of the things that always came up was like Belsnickel and several other evil gnomes and evil elves that are there that will they will take babies in the night, or they will eat your eggs, go in and take the eggs from the chickens and that sort of thing. Yeah,
they're nasty little creatures. There's several different species. The only ones that's even remotely helpful are the brownies. But most Fae folk, they're tricksters, they're liars, they're out only for themselves, and there's a connection there. Right. People that go missing a lot of times will be wearing red. The Fae folk don't like that color. Berry patches, another place that people go missing, either near or while picking berries. That's more years ago, but people going missing in a berry field while picking berries. Well, if you look at the Fae legends and things, that's where they have their mating season. That's where they hold their dances and make their music, and the berries are their food. So you're stealing from them, you're fair game.
Right. I remember that there's so many stories about, when I was in South America, there's so many stories about the little people. They call them the little people, the pequeños, chiquitito pequeños, and how, there was, oh my gosh, there were duendes, which basically were these little people that lived under the stairs. Children would see the duendes. I actually saw a video one time of a duende, a little boy chasing a duende under the carpet. It blew me away that these little creatures exist. Yeah,
I spent a year in the Philippines. Duende very popular there. Most of your First Nations culture, those tribes, they all have some sort of little person. The Algonquin tribe in New England, they have the Pukwudgies. The Cherokee in the southern Appalachians there, they have the Yunde to Sunday. I think I said that right. And again, it's a race of little people. They considered it another race of people that were older than the Cherokee. And there was times when they were at war with them. And then came to a truce. But even then they talked about that, the little people would come in and take their kids. They needed that DNA, to a little bit of human DNA in there to continue their race.
Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable. I wish there was more talk about this, because I think people have these experiences and they're afraid to talk about them because, like I say, it's the Disneyfication of this phenomenon, and it's because they've made, and I don't know if it's part of programming or what have you, but they've made these little creatures basically loving and empathetic and, like trolls and things of that nature. Yeah, I mean, it's like, Dracula. 500 years later, a bloodsucker like Dracula becomes a pariah and a misunderstood loving interest for women and little sparkly skin. And, I wonder what's going to happen 500 years with all the evil that we deal with. Yeah. 500 years later, they're going to say, oh, Hitler was a great guy, and he was a misunderstood pariah who painted roses, and we have an amusement park dedicated to him, and we have a cereal dedicated to him, and a little puppet on Sesame Street dedicated to him. I mean, that's where we are. We take these beings. I mean, you were saying earlier about fairy tales, and you look at people like the Brothers Grimm. You look at what they wrote, and all of the stories that we see, like from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs to Little Red Riding Hood, all of these stories deal with the dead. Like Snow White is about a prince who marries a corpse, or you're dealing with the Seven Dwarfs where they were basically scavengers, and they found the body of the princess and they wanted to eat that body. It wasn't that they wanted to take her and put her in a glass coffin. They wanted to eat her. Yeah. Okay? And so, I mean, if we were to find out the truth about why things disappear and why things do the way they do, I mean, they'd have to. I mean, they need to read your books. It's what they need to do and understand a little better about what's out there.
And if you look at the Grimm tales, particularly in the original German, they're not children's tales at all. I don't know at what point it switched over that fairy tales are for kids, but they've been cleaned up, they've been sanitized, Disneyfied is the word that I like to use, and that's what you think of. And you can have somebody that believes in Bigfoot, that believes in UFOs, believes in the Loch Ness Monster, and you mention the Fae folk, and they'll laugh at you. Yeah. I don't think it's that much of a stretch.
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, you look at something like Red Riding Hood. She goes through the woods, right? And she goes to her grandmother, and her grandmother's laying there in the bed. It's not her grandmother, but a wolf. And you look at it in a different sense, that it wasn't Red Riding Hood. It was a priest, and he was wearing the red robes, and he went through the forest with wine, and and bread, and he wanted to give the sacrament to a demon. And it was a beast. It was a werewolf. And that werewolf, that's why he said, oh, what great eyes you have, what big teeth you have. Because it was almost like summoning that being, whatever it is, that beastly being, out of the body of the grandmother. So it was basically an exorcism. The story of Little Red Riding Hood is the story of an exorcism. And, of course, the woodsman comes in and kills everybody. But still, it's still a creepy story in the woods. And I think a lot of people forget that those stories did have dark origins. And they did, and that there are things in the forest that we need to be aware of. And we need to. It's kind of a terrifying idea to be out in the middle of nowhere with no effects or anything.
And if you think about the species that we do know, the animals that we do know and recognize, I read somewhere about how many thousands of new types of animals that we recognize are found in places like the rainforest every year. New spiders, new birds, things that we didn't know existed the year before. Well, if you think about there's that many things that we do know and acknowledge that are out there, what's out there that we don't know about, that we don't acknowledge, things that we don't understand or have any scientific or rational thought behind?
30 years ago, there were a group of people, I think it was in New Zealand or Papua New Guinea, who basically, they would be camping out in the woods and they'd see this three-eyed dinosaur. And it was this upright walking, it looked like a velociraptor, and it had three eyes, and they also always see the three-eyed lizard and whatever. And everybody thought they were crazy. And then all of a sudden, somebody caught that three-eyed lizard and realized that there were a lot of them. And what was going on is that they were a species that was thought to be extinct. It was called the Tuitara, is the name of the creature. And I remember this well because it was 30 years ago. They said, we discovered this species of dinosaur that supposedly disappeared, as three-eyed dinosaur called the Tuitara. And so the Tuitara exists, but the problem is they're going to be rendered extinct because now people know that they have a diet of mice. And so they've been feeding the mice and fattening up, and it kills them. So it's kind of a crazy thing. Anyway, Steve Stockton's with us today on Channel Weird. We're going to be back with more of these strange stories, woodland and otherwise, right here on Channel Weird. We'll be back.
AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com. Are you stressed? I mean, who isn't? Anxiety creeping in? No, not that. Is sleep hard to attain because your brain just won't slow down? We're living in crazy times, and the fear knob has been turned up. Okay, there's an answer. Take a big breath, exhale, and go log on to AncientLifeOil.com. CBD, broad and full spectrum, organic and non-GMO CBD for you to enjoy. Change your tune from fear to calm, from brain overload to clear thinking. 0.003 THC on full spectrum and 0% THC on broad spectrum. Competitive pricing with the best quality. Also know everything is going to get better. No worries, be happy. CBD can help calm so your nerves don't think they're a 6-string electric guitar. Enjoy life, smile, and log on to AncientLifeOil.com for great CBD. That's AncientLifeOil.com. You'll be glad you did.
Hey guys, it's Clyde Lewis. Have you ever wanted Ground Zero merchandise but didn't know where to go? Well, I want to let you know that we now have our own online store with such items as t-shirts, hoodies, decals, tote bags, and other exclusive specialty apparel. There's a secure and easy-to-use shopping cart for your purchases. Coming soon will be signed posters and coffee mugs available as we are constantly adding new items. So shop today at the official Ground Zero store by going to groundzeromerch.com. That's groundzeromerch.com.
Following a disaster, your home emergency kit will be invaluable. Building a kit doesn't take long, and you'll be glad you did when disaster strikes. Here's a list of items to include: a first aid kit, battery-powered or hand crank radio, flashlight, extra batteries, an emergency whistle, cell phone with charger, cash and small bills, a local map with your family meeting place identified, food and water to last 2 weeks, garbage bags, dust masks, and seasonal clothing and footwear. Add prescription medications or any other important items unique to your family's needs. Once you've created your kit, check food expiry dates once a year and update seasonal clothing for growing children. If you have pets, make sure you have everything your furry friends need in an easy-to-carry grab-and-go bag. To learn more about preparing an emergency kit, visit mil.wa.gov/preparedness and get 2 weeks ready.
Be sure to get your low-cost 2-week supply of food with a miraculous 25-year shelf life by going to preparewithgroundzero.com.
Hey guys, this is Clyde Lewis from Ground Zero. In order to counter the growing suppression and censorship of information, we've created our own private digital playground called Aftermath.media. It's an exclusive online multimedia library featuring a social media platform, videos, audio clips, archive shows, and research groups. There are also documents and a news aggregator, all for $10 a month. If you sign up for a yearly subscription this March, it's only $79. So go to Aftermath.media. Again, that's Aftermath.media.
Hi, I'm Stephen Briggs from the Surfer Music app. Surfer links thousands of stations displaying song titles and artists organized by genre. It's easy to find your favorites. You can join our Kickstarter campaign. Help us build 5 new features for the Surfer Music app. Find out more, go to Kickstarter.com and search for Surfer Music, S-U-R-F-R. For a direct link, go to surfer.fm and click the Kickstarter banner. That's SURFR.fm.
Steve Stockton with us today on Channel Weird. Strange things in the woods and my strange world. We've been talking about a lot of wood stuff. It's very interesting, very intriguing. So, tell me about the Wendigo. And the reason why I'm interested in the Wendigo is because it's always fascinated me as another winter woodland creature. What is the Wendigo and where does it hang out?
Depending on the folklore that you listen to, First Nations people consider that a type of shapeshifter. That it can take on many forms. But
like the skinwalker?
It's similar to a skinwalker, but it's just, some of those there's an overlap in between what they are and the things that they do, the purposes that they serve. I had an experience growing up where we saw something, a friend and I did, from school, that we were later told by someone from Cherokee that it was a Wendigo. And but it wasn't in the wintertime, it was in the summertime. And we were...
What did it look like?
The best way I can describe it, it looked like the skull of a horse, but with sharp teeth. And it had big, huge pop eyes, and instead of on the sides of the head like a horse. I mean, I know what a horse looks like. My grandmother had a horse farm. They were on the front of its skull. And it seemed to have some kind of, either a cloak or some kind of dark covering or something over the top of it. And the family lived a couple miles back from the main road, had a long driveway, long gravel driveway. About halfway down that driveway was an old shale pit. It had been a working farm a couple of centuries ago. And we were down there messing around in the shale pit looking for fossils. Well, up on the bank above the shale pit, there was an old tumble-down shack. And we heard some kind of noise. It was kind of like between a huff and a growl. And we both looked up about the same time, and this thing, whatever it was, its head was poking out of the window on that shack, and it had that grin. It was either hungry or just a grin of rictus or whatever, but all I saw was these sharp teeth and those huge eyes. And our paralysis broke about the same time. We were like maybe 10 years old. Took off up the hill back toward my friend's house just as hard as we could go. And his mom heard us coming. That's how much noise we were making, met us outside. And, of course, we were just panicked and stricken and screaming and crying. And finally his dad comes out, and he's like, I've had enough. I don't know what you boys saw down there, but I'm going to go take care of it. Takes a shotgun, goes off down the hill. We're thinking, okay, we're sitting out there. His mom's giving us Kool-Aid, trying to calm us down. And we keep listening. They're going to hear some shouting or screams or a shotgun blast. Nothing. And about 15, 20 minutes later, he comes back up the hill, got a shotgun over his shoulder, but he's got this strange countenance about him, just this weird look on his face. And he came over to us, and he's like, I want you boys to swear to me that you'll never go down there and play in that shale pit again. And we did. He's like, I'm totally serious. I mean, he made us basically take an oath. Said, I don't want you down there. You don't need to be down there at all. So we promised, and I kept my end of the bargain. That's been 40 years ago, a little over 40 years ago, and I haven't been back. But my friend wouldn't go back down there either. And he told me at school a couple of weeks later, he said, my dad pulled that old shack down into the shale pit and burned it. So whatever he saw upset him. Well, that gentleman, my friend's father, was full Cherokee. And I didn't know about the Wendigo or skinwalkers or anything like that at the time. But years and years later, somebody told me that's what you saw. And then him being full Cherokee, he knew the rules of the elders and stuff, knew not to talk about it.
Right.
It was probably something that was there for him or was after him for something he had done, and we just happened to see it. And I think that happens a lot of times in the paranormal. Sometimes we're witness to things that are meant either as a sign or for whatever reason for somebody else, and we just happen to be there as an observer. John Keel talked about that.
Oh, yeah.
And even
About
my
Mothman.
grandmother, when I mentioned stuff that I'd seen to her sometimes, her cryptic explanation was, well, sometimes you'll see things that don't make a lot of sense,
Right.
but that's for somebody else.
Right.
So,
See, people always ask me, what's your favorite paranormal story? And I go, it's always Mothman. Mothman terrifies me.
yeah.
Anything that would be 6 feet tall with a 100-foot wingspan with big red eyes swooping down from the sky, terrifying. It's terrifying to think about that. It's like a
Flatwood Monster
demon.
is probably mine.
Flatwood, really?
The big Ace of Spades looking
Yeah,
thing
Ace of
behind
Spades,
it, and
yeah.
the metallic dress. And
Yes, exactly.
to me, when I see that illustration from the eyewitnesses, it looks like some sort of demon. It looks
It
like
does.
something I don't want to mess with.
What about the Jersey Devil?
Now that's what I'm curious about, and there's so many different stories about that. The Leeds Devil or the Jersey Devil, that the lady, it was her 13th child, and she cursed it and gave it to the devil, and then there's another version that she had made a deal, some sort of pact with the devil, and that's why the way the kid was. And when it was born, it flew around the room and smacked people, and then went up the chimney, and then stayed in the Pine Barrens and bothered the neighbors and the livestock and things. interesting story. I mean, I can see it as a folk tale, as a cautionary tale to keep people out of the Pine Barrens.
Right.
But that's one I'm going to look forward to. My writer, Gemma, that I discussed, she lives in New Jersey. Is from there. Jersey girl, born and raised. And that's one of the things we're going to do this summer. We're going to go look for the Jersey Devil. We're going to go spend a few days in the Pine Barrens and just see. And I've got some other stories from there. There's a story in my book about a guy that was tramping around in the Pine Barrens and found a fresh pizza, still in the box. It was opened, pepperoni pizza. He said it hadn't been there long. It wasn't wet. It wasn't moldy. Nothing, no animals or insects had partaken of it. But he's like, what was that? And he said, it's almost like a trap, like something had put bait out there for me. He's like, there's no way I would have eaten it or touched it or even gone near it. And at the same time he's telling me that story, he was telling me about some of the other things he had encountered in the Pine Barrens. And one was a person wearing nothing but a clown mask and a pair of tube socks, carefully picking his way through a briar patch. And he's like, but that's a story for another time, and I never have gotten the finish on that one, but it's obviously a weird place if you're even seeing humans doing things like that. Didn't think of what else might be in there.
Lately, I've been reading a lot of stories about predatory Sasquatch, and meaning that we've always been, again, Disneyfied, or whatever you want to call it, about Harry and the Hendersons and how Bigfoot's this passive, misunderstood creature. And lately, I've been hearing stories about investigations into murders or deaths, as Bigfoot being the character or the creature that commits these killings. And somebody else wrote me a letter when I was talking about it, said, yeah, you don't know what it's like to be sitting in your campsite hearing, these wallops and chirps and whatever you hear, and all of a sudden rocks the size of grapefruit start being pelted at you from no place that you can even, What's the story on Sasquatch now? Is Sasquatch getting a little bit more angry as we're moving into his habitat?
That could be. I mean, we're encroaching on his area, but maybe they're just like people. Maybe there's good and bad. There's ones that are friendly. There's ones that you don't want to mess with. I've heard stories. I mean, there's some dating back to here we got the Ape Canyon attack just in the shadow of Mount St. Helens there that happened back in the 20s. Where the miners were trapped in the cabin by a group of what they described as wild, hairy men. Had them even trying to reach in the cabin and grab an axe. Things. They showered boulders down on the cabin all night. One of them, I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he wrote a book about it, claimed to have shot one of them and saw it fall off like a 300-foot cliff down to the bottom. There's a paranormal group in California that's been making forays up there. They think they've discovered where that cabin was. It actually burned in, I think, the late 60s or early 70s. And if they've located the cabin, then they know the general area, and they're going to try to see if there's some kind of a skeleton somewhere there. But it happens. I mean, going back, that's one of the theories on some of the missing person cases out of the Smokies, that there are wild, feral, cannibal men that live in the mountains there. And I take that as sort of a backhanded way of saying Bigfoot or Sasquatch or some kind of creature. And the Native Americans have stories about hairy men, hairy creatures, a hairy race of people that live there. Also, like the Bennington Triangle area in Bennington, Vermont, a lot of strange things happen there, a lot of missing people. There was a case years and years ago, in stagecoach days, where the coach was coming through and they just described it as a wild, hairy man. They didn't know Bigfoot or Sasquatch back then. Ran out of the woods, turned the stagecoach over, looked in at the people, tried to get them out, couldn't, and then screamed and ran away into the woods.
It's a story about that little boy, I don't know where it was, I think it was in the Carolinas, where he went missing for like 2 days. And it was rainy, and it was just disgusting and horrible. And then he just shows up. And when they asked him, how did you survive? It was like bitter cold and the rain and everything. And he said that a big dog, basically took him into his little area and kept him warm, and then released him.
Yeah.
Now, big dog or Bigfoot or werewolf or dogman. I mean, these are stories.
There's a similar story where a child was missing for a couple of days. They found him, and he said a bear took care of him, took him into its cave, cuddled him, went out and picked berries and brought him back and fed him to him, and then took him and put him where he would be found.
Yeah.
Bears don't behave like that. They're
No.
not going to cuddle a human child. They're not going to pick berries and bring to you. I mean, they might kind of mother a person a little bit, but they're not going to pick berries and bring them to you.
No, it's just some fascinating stories of it. And I remember when they did the search for that little boy, they were listening to my show, actually, because it was odd because one of the guys called, and he said, I'm in one of the search teams about this young boy. And when I said to him, I said, what was the first thing they thought of when the little boy described bear, dog, or whatever it is, it's basically cuddling him and bringing him berries? They said the first thing we all thought was Bigfoot. That's the first thing I mean, the news wouldn't report that.
Yeah.
But everybody in the search team thought to themselves, this is a Bigfoot story.
Yeah.
A huge
And that's
Bigfoot
the
story.
problem you run into. The minute somebody mentions bear, dog, whatever, then it's like, okay, well, that's all it was. Nothing to see here, folks. Go home. But again, dogs and bear don't behave that way.
No, it's fascinating the way they can cover things up like that. And I shake my head and there's these obvious stories of, tales of Bigfoot or tales of some other creature. And the problem we have is that they've rendered them tabloid fodder. And so like the Disneyfication of Fae people, well, the tabloid fodder of Bigfoot has always irked me. And the reason why it irks me is because, there's nothing that I find outrageous about a mountain ape existing in the Pacific Northwest or in the South or in all those places where he's sighted. I don't see a problem with that. I don't know why people find a problem with a mountain ape. I just don't see why.
Well, there was a time when the big apes, the gorillas, weren't even thought to exist. I mean, we're talking early 1900s up until probably like 1920 or so. That was supposedly a folk tale, that the great apes, that was just a...
Or the
fake-
panda.
Yeah. Another
The
one.
first panda ever to come into captivity, I believe, was 1930. And it wasn't until like 1925, 1928, where the way they found the panda was that it was a Mongolian man in his little hut, and he had a skin on his wall of this creature, this the hide, and it was black and white and whatever. And they said, "Where'd you get that?" He says, "Well, there's these huge teddy bears. These teddy bears look, and they're not teddy bears, but they're very, very, aggressive." And he shot one, and he put the hide up, and then they went on excursion about 1930. They were able to find the bears and the pandas and bring them into captivity. And I remember too, I guess it was Nixon or someone got a gift from one of the Chinese authorities. It was a panda. They used to call it panda diplomacy because they didn't know what to do with the pandas, because they said, what do we do with a panda? Now they're everywhere. You see them everywhere.
Yeah. So I think there are creatures like that out there, and Bigfoot may be something natural more than supernatural. It's just good at concealing itself or hiding, or and then you always hear, well, how come we've never found the remains of one? Well,
Right.
when's the last time you were in the woods and you saw a bear carcass?
You don't, and
don't.
that's the point. You don't see it. I haven't. The only carcasses you come upon usually are deer.
And that's usually where somebody's poached it or something,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
before predation, because the other woodland creatures will eat it.
Right.
So,
Do you think Bigfoot buried their dead?
I'm sorry, what was it?
I said, do you think Bigfoot or Sasquatch, do you think they bury their dead?
That's a possibility. I mean, they're human-like in a lot of ways. It wouldn't be surprising. And a lot of animals, even like dogs and things like that, they, I think, have a sense that they're going to die, and they'll go off somewhere. I remember we had an old hound dog when I was a kid that lived to be like 21, 22 years old.
Yeah.
And she went way off out into the woods about half a mile away from the house and died. And I think certain animals get that sense. And really
Elephants do that.
The elephant
Yeah.
graveyard. I was just going to say that,
Yeah.
yeah. So it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, I think the more we investigate and the more we talk about these things, I think the more we find links and we find similarities between us and those creatures, and how, while there are very little of them, we still sometimes get a glimpse, and it's magical to say the least. Oh, it's amazing. Steve Stockton with us right here on Channel Weird. Join us for more. We'll be right back. Don't go away.
AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com. Are you stressed? I mean, who isn't? Anxiety creeping in? No, not that. Is sleep hard to attain because your brain just won't slow down? We're living in crazy times, and the fear knob has been turned up. Okay, there's an answer. Take a big breath, exhale, and go log on to ancientlifeoil.com. CBD, broad and full spectrum, organic and non-GMO CBD for you to enjoy. Change your tune from fear to calm, from brain overload to clear thinking. 0.003 THC on full spectrum and 0% THC on broad spectrum. Competitive pricing with the best quality. Also know everything is going to get better. No worries, be happy. CBD can help calm so your nerves don't think they're a 6-string electric guitar. Enjoy life, smile, and log on to ancientlifeoil.com for great CBD. That's ancientlifeoil.com. You'll be glad you did.
Hey guys, it's Clyde Lewis. Have you ever wanted Ground Zero merchandise but didn't know where to go? Well, I want to let you know that we now have our own online store with such items as t-shirts, hoodies, decals, tote bags, and other exclusive specialty apparel. There's a secure and easy-to-use shopping cart for your purchases. Coming soon will be signed posters and coffee mugs available as we are constantly adding new items. So shop today at the official Ground Zero store by going to groundzeromerch.com. That's groundzeromerch.com.
Following a disaster, your home emergency kit will be invaluable. Building a kit doesn't take long, and you'll be glad you did when disaster strikes. Here's a list of items to include: a first aid kit, battery-powered or hand crank radio, flashlight, extra batteries, an emergency whistle, cell phone with charger, cash and small bills, a local map with your family meeting place identified, food and water to last 2 weeks, garbage bags, dust masks, and seasonal clothing and footwear. Add prescription medications or any other important items unique to your family's needs. Once you've created your kit, check food expiry dates once a year and update seasonal clothing for growing children. If you have pets, make sure you have everything your furry friends need in an easy-to-carry grab-and-go bag. To learn more about preparing an emergency kit, visit mil.wa.gov/preparedness and get 2 weeks ready.
Be sure to get your low-cost 2-week supply of food with a miraculous 25-year shelf life by going to preparewithgroundzero.com.
Hey guys, this is Clyde Lewis from Ground Zero. In order to counter the growing suppression and censorship of information, we've created our own private digital playground called Aftermath.media. It's an exclusive online multimedia library featuring a social media platform, videos, audio clips, archive shows, and research groups. There are also documents and a news aggregator, all for $10 a month. If you sign up for a yearly subscription this March, it's only $79. So go to Aftermath.media. Again, that's Aftermath.media.
Hi, I'm Stephen Briggs from the Surfer Music app. Surfer links thousands of stations displaying song titles and artists organized by genre. It's easy to find your favorites. You can join our Kickstarter campaign. Help us build 5 new features for the Surfer Music app. Find out more, go to Kickstarter.com and search for Surfer Music, S-U-R-F-R. For a direct link, go to surfer.fm and click the Kickstarter banner. That's SURFR.fm.
Steve Stockton with us on Channel Weird. Hearing a lot of interesting stories about the woods, creatures, fae people, fae folk. Okay, now there's another thing that I've always heard about the woods, and I don't know if I've experienced it, maybe I did. There are times when you're in the woods, and I've heard many people talk about this, where a lot of people go to their same favorite place in the woods, and during the time, Coffinberry Lake. I don't know if you've ever been out to Coffinberry Lake. No. There's a wooded area in Coffinberry Lake, out here in Oregon. It's near Astoria, that area, Coffinberry Lake. That people say they go to their favorite part of the woods, and for some reason they feel like they're in a vortex, and it's taken them to another time. They feel like they're in another time, like their watch stops, and nothing looks familiar to them. Now, I know that there are, and scientists have said, that there are eddies and other things that happen Rosen bridges, they call them Einstein Rosen bridges, where something happens where there is a time vortex. You don't see it, you just feel like you're in it. Have you heard anything about these time vortexes within the forests?
Yeah, absolutely. I've not only heard about them, I've experienced them before. I was in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park one time up near Klingman's Dome, and I'd gone off trail. I don't always do the right thing, do the touristy thing. If I've got a GPS, I go wherever it leads me. And I was off trail looking at some stuff. And Clyde, I came into a clearing where there was just the most amazing oak tree I've ever seen. And there are red oaks and things in the Smokies. They're not very common up when you get around that elevation where Klingman's Dome is, but it was down below the dome. And I walked into this clearing and looked at the tree. It was like a Disney tree or something. It's like it had been imagineered. It was so real that it didn't even look real. And I'm walking around the tree and I'm looking at it from all sides and I'm marveling at it. And another thing that often happens, that was the first time I'd had it happen at the same time, the woods will go absolutely quiet. I mean dead quiet, like literally somebody turned the volume down. You don't hear birds, you don't hear the wind, you don't hear the mountain stream, you don't hear anything. And it got really quiet like that, and I'm standing here in awe of this tree, and it was like something just said, that would be such an awesome spot to just sit down, relax, maybe take a nap. And I'm thinking, yeah, that sounds... And then I thought, wait a minute, what am I talking about? I'm up here on Klingman's Dome, it's going to be dark soon, I'm off trail, I've got to get out of here and go back down. And that kind of made me wonder if that was some spirit of the woods or whatever you will, trying to lull me into that to get me to, sit down and go to sleep, and then I'd be in one of these books, somebody that was in the Smokies and never came back. And you think about that, if there's people that aren't familiar with what can happen out there, that have never experienced anything like that, and then to have that happen, maybe that's one of the explanations.
Yeah, the story... some of the most terrifying stories of this happening would be in the Japanese woods, where those people go to commit suicide. And what they've determined is that people go in there and they're disoriented to begin with because they want to end their lives. But then they go into an area that they're not familiar with, and then they just decide, well, this is a good place as any just to sit back and just let whatever happen. And I remember reading that saying, wow, why would they, come up with this idea? They're going in to commit suicide. I mean, that's their intent. But then they say, well, no, a lot of people probably aren't going there to commit suicide. They're thinking about it, but something goes on in the woods that is, and we were talking earlier about tulpas. We were talking earlier about when we were off the air, we were talking about tulpas and how mere thoughts, can conjure things in the forests. Mere thought, well, anywhere, really. You can conjure anything out of your mind, and if you're going in there with a distraught mind, I can imagine what you can conjure when you're in the woods. You
could definitely think something up that's going to tell you like an angel of death or something like that, something that wants to take your soul and carry you away. I believe in that. I believe in the thought forms and the tulpas and things. Walter Gibson, famous writer that came up with The Shadow, the old Pulp Fiction stories and the radio plays. Man lived and breathed The Shadow, had like 6 typewriters set up, and he would move from one to the other, working on different stories at the same time. And I think he wrote over like 138 books and I don't know how many radio episodes of The Shadow. Well, he began seeing Lamont Cranston, which was in the stories and the books. That was the person that was the Shadow. He started seeing somebody in his apartment in New York City that had on the overcoat, that had the scarf, that had the slouch hat pulled down. And he called it a mental impression. But it's a thought form. It's a tulpa. I mean, literally, this man spent hours and hours and hours in that apartment with these half dozen typewriters, blood, sweat, and tears into each one of these stories. And that was one of the places that Hans Holder had investigated, that Walter would have dinner parties and people would be like, who's the guy upstairs that looks like the Shadow? Did you hire somebody to come in? And he said, no, it's a mental impression where I've put all this into that. So if you can do it with something like that, right, I think you can do it with anything. And
yeah, we were discussing the Hat Man off air. So many things we were talking about before we came on the air here, Steve and I. We were discussing the Hat Man. and or Omu Negru, or there's so many names for this character: the Dark Man, the Top Hat Man,
Papa Legba.
yeah, exactly, or the Grinning Man.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been there's a new television program that's on. It's a streaming program. I think it's on Prime Video, called Them. And in the series Them, there is a Hat Man, and he's a old preacher that basically, again, an old preacher from the Old West who's haunting this black family. And if you remember in Poltergeist, there was an old preacher that had a black hat that walk in and scare the little girl, wanted Carol Ann. He wanted to steal her and take her away. And that image of the shadow, the Lamont Cranston shadow, and of course John Keel talked about the Grinning Man. That image has been a constant in a lot of people's dreams and in a lot of people's experiences. I remember I had an experience with the Grinning Man in my sleep where I was looking over this pristine, beautiful sunset, and I saw a windmill, one of those old windmills on a farm, kind of creaking in the distance, and see a few birds silhouetted against the sky. And I hear something behind me, and I look, and there's this man with white hair, grinning, wearing a hat, and he just twists my neck. And I hear a crack, and that wakes me out of my sleep.
Wow.
So that was the thing. I mean, ever since I had that experience, I just thought, wow, this is a very real archetype that either can be conjured or thought out or even projected into the darkness.
And that happens, even like some of the stories on the internet that have started out as a creepypasta, Slenderman,
like
for
Slenderman,
example,
yeah,
made up, totally made up, but yet now we're getting to the point where people are reporting seeing this creature. And you had the two little girls that were going to murder another little girl as a sacrifice to Slenderman. Right. I mean, that's just, there's something there. There's some kind of power there. It's a manifestation. It's something that's dark that's able to pick up on that and feed enough energy into it, it can appear.
Wes Craven, I interviewed him, and he told me that when he created Freddy Krueger, another Hat Man type character, he created Freddy Krueger, and one of the things that scared him was that after Freddy Krueger had been created, Richard Ramirez started doing his killing, the Night Stalker. And he thought for a while there, and I think he had to go through therapy. I don't remember. I did the interview a long time ago. And he told me, he says he thought that what he had done is when he created Freddy Krueger, that tulpa, I mean, he's now, more than just a tulpa. He's a horror creature. Somehow left the screen, and his spirit inhabited the body of Richard Ramirez.
I think that's a possibility. I heard of a story kind of based on that. People call them Hmong. That's like Hmong. I forget exactly where they are, somewhere in the South Pacific. There was a village there where when teenagers would go to sleep, they were starting to die.
Oh, yeah.
And they were having like these block parties and stuff to try to stay awake as long as possible. Or they would have somebody babysit them and would let them sleep. And then if they saw them in some sort of obvious distress in their sleep, they would wake them up because they were healthy, young people dying while they were asleep.
Well, there was a Vietnamese, I can't remember what year it was. There was a study on Vietnamese men. Basically, these Vietnamese men were like monks, and they didn't do anything really. They just slept, and they were having these nightmares. And what would happen is they'd die in their sleep of arrhythmia. And one person that survived, one of the guys that survived, said that when he had arrhythmia and they brought him back and they said, "What caused your arrhythmia, do you think?" And he said, "I had dreams of this old hag coming to me in my sleep, wanting me to have sex with her."
Wow.
And it was like, it sounds like a succubus,
exactly.
The succubi or whatever it is. Steve Stockton with his strange stories for sure. I'm getting creeped out just talking about them. Anyway, we'll be back with more from Steve Stockton right here on Channel Weird.
AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com. Are you stressed? I mean, who isn't? Anxiety creeping in? No, not that. Is sleep hard to attain because your brain just won't slow down? We're living in crazy times, and the fear knob has been turned up. Okay, there's an answer. Take a big breath, exhale, and go log on to AncientLifeOil.com. CBD, broad and full spectrum, organic and non-GMO CBD for you to enjoy. Change your tune from fear to calm. from brain overload to clear thinking. 0.003 THC on full spectrum and 0% THC on broad spectrum. Competitive pricing with the best quality. Also know everything is going to get better. No worries, be happy. CBD can help calm so your nerves don't think they're a 6-string electric guitar. Enjoy life, smile, and log on to ancientlifeoil.com for great CBD. That's ancientlifeoil.com. You'll be glad you did.
Hey guys, it's Clyde Lewis. Have you ever wanted Ground Zero merchandise but didn't know where to go? Well, I want to let you know that we now have our own online store with such items as t-shirts, hoodies, decals, tote bags, and other exclusive specialty apparel. There's a secure and easy-to-use shopping cart for your purchases. Coming soon will be signed posters and coffee mugs available as we are constantly adding new items. So shop today at the official Ground Zero store by going to groundzeromerch.com. That's groundzeromerch.com.
Following a disaster, your home emergency kit will be invaluable. Building a kit doesn't take long, and you'll be glad you did when disaster strikes. Here's a list of items to include: a first aid kit, battery-powered or hand crank radio, flashlight, extra batteries, an emergency whistle, cell phone with charger, cash and small bills, a local map with your family meeting place identified, food and water to last 2 weeks, garbage bags, dust masks, and seasonal clothing and footwear. Add prescription medications or any other important items unique to your family's needs. Once you've created your kit, check food expiry dates once a year and update seasonal clothing for growing children. If you have pets, make sure you have everything your furry friends need in an easy-to-carry grab-and-go bag. To learn more about preparing an emergency kit, visit mil.wa.gov/preparedness and get 2 weeks ready.
Be sure to get your low-cost 2-week supply of food with a miraculous 25-year shelf life by going to preparewithgroundzero.com.
Hey guys, this is Clyde Lewis from Ground Zero. In order to counter the growing suppression and censorship of information, we've created our own private digital playground called Aftermath.media. It's an exclusive online multimedia library featuring a social media platform, videos, audio clips, archive shows, and research groups. There are also documents and a news aggregator, all for $10 a month. If you sign up for a yearly subscription this March, it's only $79. So go to Aftermath.media. Again, that's Aftermath.media.
Hi, I'm Stephen Briggs from the Surfer Music app. Surfer links thousands of stations displaying song titles and artists organized by genre. It's easy to find your favorites. You can join our Kickstarter campaign. Help us build 5 new features for the Surfer Music app. Find out more, go to Kickstarter.com and search for Surfer Music, S-U-R-F-R. For a direct link, go to surfer.fm and click the Kickstarter banner. That's S-U-R-F-R.fm.
And we're back with Steve Stockton. My Strange World and Strange Things in the Woods. Look at these books. Buy these books. Just a lot of great stories from this man, and I'm having a great time just talking. We were talking during the break about how, let's go back to the woods. People are on the trail, and then they step off the trail. Mm-hmm. And what happens to them?
Well, any number of things. I mean, it's easy to get turned around and disoriented, especially if it's not someplace you're familiar with and you're just kind of following a trail. I've lost the trail before, miss a blaze or something, and end up not knowing where I am exactly. And that's time when hopefully you've got some wood lore, some knowledge about you as far as orienteering and things like that, where you've got a compass or a GPS and can find your way back. But there have been cases where people, Clyde, have gone missing, sometimes for days, and they said they didn't go anywhere, but whatever was around them changed. And people talk like, I was on the trail, and then the trail wasn't there anymore, and I didn't see my friends. The river was still in the same place. There were still trees, but it was different. It was somewhere else. I didn't recognize anything. I tried going back from the way I came. The trail went left instead of right. The things that I remembered passing, they weren't there anymore.
Right.
So I think, like we were talking during the break, there's another parallel, I don't know if it's the universe or just area. There's a gray area, I think, between what is real and what isn't sometimes, or
Right.
what our perception of real and unreal is.
It's like the second Genesis theory that we have like the upside down and the right side up, or we have like loaves of bread. It's like little slices of bread, one on top of the other, and we overlap from one day to the next, and we don't know it. But then things start happening, like Mandela effects, for example. I mean, what's your opinion on that?
I don't know. It would be, like you said, strange for that many people to have group mismemories, to disremember something like that. Sometimes I wonder if in 2012 the Mayans weren't right, the world ended, and what you said, our consciousness has continued. We don't know what to do or what else to do, that the world's didn't end like we thought it would, with explosions and darkness and nothing, but yet we've gone on. This is
Right.
where we're at now.
Well, I mean, what they say, I remember when I was a kid growing up watching, in Sunday school, and they'd say, the world shall pass in the twinkling of an eye, meaning that just like that, we'll be in another dimension or another world or another whatever, and we won't recognize it because it'll happen so quickly. And, I mean, it's a boggling thing to think about how our world may have ended back in 2012 or whenever, because, well, what did they do at CERN? They created the Higgs boson. And I remember Stephen Hawking said, well, if it was unstable, we'd never know that something is gnawing at the universe and that we're just basically waiting for everything just to collapse. Well, you see what the Earth is going through right now. You see how we're, here we are in the 21st century. We still can't slay a plague. The smallest thing that could possibly scare us is out there. It's like a boogeyman. And people are waiting for the moment that we can just look at the boogeyman in the face and say, we're living lives now with risk, and we always have. I mean, you can't chase a no-risk life. That's impossible. But they want us to. They want us to think that we can beat it. I don't think we can. I think it's going to be a part of our lives now. We're not going to be able to avoid it because we've moved into a different paradigm. It's a different paradigm altogether, and it's something that, you've talked about and many other people have talked about.
No. There's definitely a change. Things feel different to me. And some of those Mandela effects, like people remembering the sun looking a different color when they were a kid. I've experienced that. I remember growing up in the 60s and 70s and things looked different. Things felt different. Things smelled different. I just attribute it to getting older, but then I've heard other people talk about that and maybe pull out family photographs and see, the sun was yellow then. It's white now. It's getting hotter. It's, maybe that's what's going to happen. The sun's just going to envelop us, and that'll be the way the world ends.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many ways that people have pictured the apocalypse to go down. I think we're in the middle of it now, and I think that with all of these discoveries that we've been playing with, I think we knew all along that there were other dimensions. We knew all along that there are some things that get in. I mean, I think it was Robert Anton Wilson says that, what we've done is we've constructed this matrix, this safety net to build around us, that truly the paranormal is the normal, meaning that, every once in a while there are shocks to the system that we call paranormal, but in reality, it is the strangeness and the weirdness that's around us all the time.
Absolutely.
We've just found a way to put barriers against it. We pray, we're religious, we do all these things that think they're going to keep the vampires from lapping at our toes. But no, the vampires are there, the demons are there, everything peculiar and spooky is there. It's just that we find ourselves in a position at times to see it.
Absolutely. I agree with that. And when you mentioned religious and the Christian paradigm thing there, that's what we consider natural, if you believe that, was spoken forth out of the supernatural. So the supernatural was already there, then the natural was created, and we were put in it.
Right.
So, yeah, we're in a box, and everything that really exists is outside our box. And sometimes I think it opens the lid and peeks into our box, or something gets in. And if you study end times prophecy and some of that, I think we're in now some of the things that described: pestilence, famine, war, disease, plagues.
It's all over.
Read the news.
It's a great time to be alive, but it's also a strange and dangerous time to be alive. And I think you sum it up in your book, Strange Things in the Woods and My Strange World. Where do you pick up these books?
They're available on Amazon or wherever fine books are sold. Publisher likes for me to say that. You can order it. It's got an ISBN number. You can get it at any library, any bookstore can order it for you. And I had another one that just came out, National Park Mysteries. They changed the title on me. National Park Mysteries and Disappearances, Volume 1, The Great Smoky Mountains National Park. That was just released on Thursday, and it delves a little more like where these are. Strange Things in the Woods is stories of just that, strange things that other people had encountered in the woods. Some of those stories go back 30, 40 or more years. And the other book, My Strange World, those are my personal paranormal experiences in there.
I understand that your new book that hasn't even come out yet has already been pre-ordered, and it looks like it's going to be a #1 bestseller.
Yeah, #1, the Volume 1, Great Smoky Mountains National Park, was released Thursday. It went to #1, and they set up a pre-release for Volume 2 the same day that one came out.
Right.
And the pre-release is already charting on Amazon. Volume 2, California, to include Mount Shasta. I just drew a blank.
That's okay. We're getting ready to wrap up anyway.
Mount Shasta and Yosemite.
Perfect.
And the other one.
Steve, thank you so much for being on the
Thank you for
program.
having me
It
on,
was a
Clyde.
great time today. And if you want more information about the books, we're going to actually put a link up, I'm sure, on our Facebook page at Ground Zero Radio. So thank you so much for joining us today on Channel Weird. Exciting time to be alive, and we're always going to cover it for you right here.